In this lesson, we're going to learn how to do animation in App Inventor by creating a variation of the classic whack-a-mole app. But this one is going to be using a theme that was suggested by some students at the Boston Latin Academy, a socially useful theme of saving electricity. So it's the Turn Off Lights app. I'm going to begin by saving my project as Turn Off Lights version 1. And that will have the effect of reloading the project and changing the app's name to Turn Off Lights V1. I'm going to give it a title of Turn Off the Lights, which is going to appear in the title bar up here. I'm also going to set its screen orientation to portrait, so it'll always appear in this vertical mode. Now, the two main components for this app are going to be, from our drawing and animation drawer, a canvas and an image sprite. But we don't want to just put those right directly on the screen. Instead, we want to use a container for them, a vertical arrangement that I'm going to set to fill the screen, both horizontally and vertically. And I'm going to use this container to contain the canvas as well as a label, and eventually we're going to have buttons perhaps and other elements that go into this. And the reason we're putting it all in a container is so that we can see all of the components without having to scroll on the screen. Now I'm going to drag a canvas element. You've used the canvas before in PaintPaw. I'm going to have it fill its container. I'm going to give it a background image, namely the kitchen island image that's included in the template. App Inventor provides two animation components. A ball, which as its name suggests is just a circle. You can control the color and the size, but a ball that can move around the screen and you can control its movement with your code. And an image sprite, which is basically like a ball, except that you can associate any image with it. First, before I associate an image with this, I'm going to have it set its height to 50 pixels and its width to 25 pixels to scale it. And then I'm going to associate the light bulb image to it. Okay, so there it is. It looks like an appropriate size. And it doesn't matter where we put it on the canvas, we're going to be relocated. I'm also going to rename this component light bulb. That's the visible part of our user interface. We also have a couple of non-visible elements. One is a sound component. I'll drag that out. You've used sound before. We're going to associate a beep sound with that. And we're going to use that for beeping when we successfully touch the light bulb, but also to vibrate the device, assuming your device has a vibration capability. The last element is going to be our clock. And we're going to use this element as a timer. As you see here, a clock comes with a timer interval. That's how often the clock will tick. In this case, 1,000 milliseconds, meaning every second it's going to tick. And what we're going to do is every time it ticks, we're going to move the light bulb around on the canvas. So that takes care of our user interface. This would be a good time to test the app. There it is. I think it looks pretty nice. So now let's switch over to our blocks editor and work on the code for this app. The first thing we want to do is get our clock timer out. So you notice this is the only event handler that comes with the clock. There's lots of procedures and setters and getters that we'll use perhaps in other apps. But for this app, we only need this timer. This is the timer event handler. This will fire whenever the clock ticks, which as we saw here is going to be every second, every 1,000 milliseconds. So whatever you put in here will happen every second. And what we're going to put in there is a command to move the light bulb to a certain location. Okay, the reason I'm getting this runtime error is because this block is firing because I'm connected to my device and it has some empty arguments. So I'm going to, for the time being, go over to here and disable the timer so that will not pop up that runtime error. To begin with, let's just put in some values here. If I put in 100 in each the x and y coordinate, then this isn't going to be very effective, right? It's always going to move to 100, 100, so it's going to look like it isn't even moving. And if we go over and enable the timer and look at our app, you'll see that once it moves, it's just going to stay at coordinates 100, 100. So that's not what we want. What we do want is we want a way to have it move to a random location. And fortunately, App Inventor has a nice block in its math drawer called random integer from 1 to whatever value we put in here. App Inventor will generate a random whole number between 1 and 100 every time the clock ticks and set that as the x coordinate for the light bulb. So let's see what effect that has on the app. What we're going to see is that it's going to move randomly along a horizontal axis here that varies between 1 and 100. So that's better. What if we copy this block and stick it in here? If we do that, then what we should see is that it randomly moves within a rectangle that's 100 by 100 up in the top left corner of the canvas. So that's an improvement, but we want it to randomly move around the whole canvas. So what should we replace this 100 with? If we want the right-hand maximum value to be the right-hand edge of the canvas, we can easily do that. We can easily grab a setter for the canvas's width. So now the x value is going to vary from 1 to the width of the canvas, so all the way across the canvas. And we want to do a similar kind of thing here, only this time for the y coordinate we're going to use the height of the canvas. What I should see now over here is that it's jumping around pretty much all around the canvas. So that takes care of the animation part of the app. The next part is handling the touches on the light bulb. And we've got a bunch of blocks here that control events that happen to the light bulb. The one we want is the light bulb touched. This is very similar to the canvas touched event that you used in PaintPop, but this one fires only when the light bulb, when that image sprite is touched. And what we want to do is we want to beep or vibrate. So I'm going to pull both of those out. I'm going to beep and I'm also going to vibrate for, let's say, 500 milliseconds. Now when I go over to my app, it's moving around. If I touch it, did you hear that? I got it. I got it again and again. So that's the basis for our game. Whenever the clock ticks, the light bulb jumps to a new location. Whenever you touch it, this block will fire and cause the beep to sound and also vibrate your device if it has vibration. Mine does not. Before we move on, let's do some other minor housekeeping things. One thing we want to do is position the sprite, the light bulb, at a random location when the app starts up. So we're going to code our screen initialize block, which remember fires once when the app starts. And I'm going to simply use the same code as I'm using when the clock ticks. So that will cause it to jump to a random location every time you restart the app, which is nice. Now, the other thing about this, though, is we need to think about code hygiene. And this is a bad practice, having two identical chunks of code in two different parts of the program. So we know that whenever we see that kind of thing, we want to develop a procedure. And I'm going to name my procedure move random. And I'm going to put this code in move random and simply call move random when we initialize the screen and also when the clock ticks. So now we have just a single procedure defining and controlling how the light bulb moves, and we can then make modifications to it if we want to change it and its behavior throughout the app, both when it's initialized and when the clock ticks. Okay, so that's our animation app, very simple. In the next lesson, you're going to have some enhancements and extensions that you can do to it to make it more like a real game. So have fun with that.